And it's really interesting. When we met, I was still fighting. I was getting into heraldry. You were there to kick back and party.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are now, a deputy officer to Kingdom Seneschal, dealing with what we can admit is some very heavy material. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not an office that's. I'm going to guess here, won't I bet, this office probably takes a lot out of you. This is something you don't want to do indefinitely.
It is not something I would have the mental energy to do indefinitely.
Yeah.
This does place a lot of strain on emotional reserves, mental reserves.
And I did a video talking about when I stepped down from local Herald's office.
Mm-hmm.
Loved the office. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's a phenomenal job, but 2 years was enough.
That's what you needed, yep.
And you're sitting here talking. I mean, this is the type of topics that people get paid not small sums of money to contemplate in academia or in medicine, you know, in counseling services, and you're doing this on a volunteer basis. Like you, this is not where I saw you 20 years ago looking for it, so.
And I enjoy it. Despite it taking,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say an emotional or mental toll, but despite it requiring a certain amount of emotional and mental expenditure, I enjoy my job passionately. I truly enjoy this job.
You know, we talked about you accomplishing a major paradigm shift with your Romani research, and you see the after effects. Like you can literally stick your head out the window and go, things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing anything like that, or is it too soon in the process?
It is too soon.
Too soon. This is a bigger equation.
Mm-hmm. We are talking about not a paradigm shift for an individual or for a small community or even for a kingdom. We are talking about a paradigm shift for our entire society. And that is going to take a long time. And it should.
Well, yeah, rapid change is never good historically.
You do too much too quickly, and there's going to be a backslide. Establish, a new protocol, one baby step at a time, make sure that it gets rolling, then add the next one. And we do this slowly, one baby step at a time.
Which means it's going to be vital that your predecessor knew you guys were roughly on the same wavelength, and you're going to have the same conversation with whoever takes over the office and so forth. This isn't. I love the College of Heralds, but we have hot hand grenaded too many offices between people. I'm done. Catch. That sounds like that's not what can happen here.
It is entirely possible. It is probable that someone down the line who has this office is going to think that I did either a poor job or I didn't focus on what was important. And they're going to take it off in a different direction.
I know some of your friends who could come up with that conclusion, even though they're your best friends. So that's almost certainly.
That is neither good nor bad.
bad.
It is simply a thing.
Yeah.
And there is a certain positive to new eyes, to fresh perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely
So
is.
someone may come in behind me and gear shift.
And this goes back to what you were saying about you have to understand how you see the world. So someone in the future, by definition, they're looking at it with 2 or 4 years further into the future under their belt. They've seen the after effects and how they would have worked. So that makes sense. That makes sense.
I do understand that a lot of people, I cannot say many, most, majority, simply a lot that I've encountered.
A non-zero number.
View DEIB as an outward activity. We need to do this to be more inclusive. We need to do this to be more accessible. And there is an element of that. But it is my belief that it's all well and good to make these physical changes, but until we make the mental and emotional changes, all those physical changes are going to backslide. They're going to fall short.
At best, they could, or at worst, they're performative.
Mm-hmm.
And at best, if you're not dealing with what brought you there in the first place, you're just
They're
going to
not
go.
sustainable.
Yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
going to take you right back to where you started.
I do have to stop and say, I am not advocating against these policy changes, policy changes to be more inclusive, or ways we plan and set up our activities to be more accessible. These are good things. They're definitely positive, and I do advocate for them. It is simply my personal belief that when we heal ourselves, we will heal as a community, and we can move forward. Most of my classes, my curriculum that I have developed, I talk about consent culture.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about inclusive language.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about accessibility. I talk about boundaries. I talk about how to have difficult conversations. But all of these classes, the foundation of them is learn to do the work yourself so that you can honor it and respect it when you see it in other people. Accessibility. Accessibility is not for physically disabled people. It is not for neurodivergent or neurodiverse people. It is not for the old. It is not for the young. It is for everybody. You have accessibility needs. I have accessibility needs. My son has accessibility needs. And they're all going to be different. Accessibility is acknowledging what we need so that we can respect when someone else tells us that this is what they need.
And you're not wrong. And I want to point something out as a supporting footnote. In my younger days, one of my many titles was the tall guy, because in almost any social circle, even within the SCA where the average size is up a category, I was invariably the tallest guy in the group. So if something needed to be reached from a top shelf, or if something needed to be picked up that required substantial back strength, or if something needed to be moved or shoved, I was the go-to guy. It makes sense. Go to the biggest guy in the room.
Mm-hmm. How quickly did you get tired of having to be the fetcher and reacher?
Honestly, for me personally, that's a fair question. There really is. For me personally, the way I was raised and the mindset I had at the time, and still do now, I simply compartmentalized how frustrated I was with, I am, someone who physically can't do this needs help. If I say no, that's taking away from their day. Now, I was never self-destructive. I didn't do this till I hurt myself, but you get the idea. That was part of my culture. Hold that thought. I could see the word on the tip of your tongue. Relatively recently, we were planning for an event in Wiesenfeuer, and someone very specifically looked at me and then said, we're part of a planning group. Okay, we need to make sure we bring step ladders. We have at least 2 people. And someone said, oh, yeah, but we have Ivo. And she cut them off and said, Ivo is not 20 anymore, and I'm sick and tired of depending on someone whose car might not start. How about we try thinking ahead? Which I later found out she remembered me talking about the fact I have a lot of trouble crawling on my knees. Most people don't know this about me. I literally am 400 pounds, 389 or something. Mm-hmm. I used to be able to just spring buck into the back of a car and crawl around. Now I can't.
None of us are as young and spry as we used to be.
Now I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And that person, that's an accessibility thing, because accessibility isn't the bare minimum of can you make it to the event. I was helping out, and by telling a larger group, how about we think ahead and quit just assuming this big guy is going to be here?
Yes.
That meant I was still able to help without suddenly having to go, no, wait, I can't do this, and diminishing my contribution.
The situation was created so that you could be asked.
Well, she even went a step further. It's, we need to quit asking, we need to plan ahead. And they didn't even have to talk to me at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was, how about we assume the big guy's not going to be here and bring a ladder? But yes, you're absolutely right on that.
It is not making assumptions that other people will do work for you.
Yeah.
And we see this
Oh my
pervasively.
Jesus, yes.
Officers are in charge of making sure the job gets done. They are not required to do it themselves.
Yep.
How many times do we say, or how many times do we hear, oh, we need heralding, Ivo's gonna do it, without asking you to do it? It is assumed. Your time, emotional labor, mental labor, physical labor is voluntold. You are being volunteered without consent.
And that is not even a little bit inaccurate.
We see it all
We do.
the time.
We do.
It is woven
And-
into our culture.
And I think that really kind of dovetails. I think that dovetails into an earlier conversation we've had, and some things I've lamented about within the SCA, is the intersectionality of a lot of the work you do, and frankly, let's just say everything, because it's kind of that inclusive. But Castellana's right. Within the heraldic community, there are assumptions made about heralds, which, number one, makes it hard to get new heralds. Number two is hard on the heralds who are there. And number three usually pushes heralds in directions that they're not trained or capable of going.
Or causes burnout.
Or definitely causes burnout. When I was a
People
regional
take-
herald, we saw that a lot.
People take sabbaticals from
Yes.
the SCA because they just
Got sick and tired of being used.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
but-
And the only way we can, I am speaking definitively what I should say, it is my view that we can only change this, we can only shift this by acknowledging that we get frustrated when
And-
people do it to us. When we acknowledge that we experience it too, when we flip the script and we look outward instead of inward, we go, oh, I've been doing it to this other person and I didn't even realize I was doing it.
And you're right, and I know, and I will plead guilty on this. I was one of the early people who questioned the necessity for DEI when it first entered the SCA, and there is a credible argument to be made of why do we need DEI to be saying this should be handled by X offices. All right, I've been playing over a quarter century. This is the first academic, well-researched framework to discuss personal boundaries, personal safety, personal health, how you enjoy the world around you, let alone the SCA. The College of Heralds of Anstiora has had 40 years to come up with something, and they've been dealing with burnout and people dropping like flies for at least 30 of those years, and we haven't come up with it. This, right here, is why we need DEIB. Because the rest of us, you're right, this office shouldn't be needed. We should not need DEI. Why is Castellana the first person I've run into after a quarter century who's discussing things that we should have been discussing in the Seneschal's office, in the Herald's office, in the Chronicler's office?
We were raised uniquely and individually, each one of us.
Mhm.
None of us have the exact same background. We talk about their generation, our generation. You mentioned that it was your culture to help when someone can't reach something.
Mm-hmm.
You felt almost obligated.
No, obligated, absolutely. Moral, ethical, legal, yes, those are absolutely where I come from.
Can I say that that is due to however you were raised or trained?
Yes, 100%. I could even put names to the teachers if you wanted.
I was raised that anytime you refuse aid, anytime you do not step up when help is needed, you are being selfish, and selfishness is inherently wrong.
Yep.
There is a fine line. There's a balance. And each one of us is going to trip over that line numerous times in our lives. But if we are always giving, thinking that taking anything for ourselves or keeping anything for ourselves is inherently wrong, we will burn out. And
the other end of that Castellana is not talking about is when that is your worldview, that is the lens you see everyone else in, which the first person to say, no, I need a break, you instinctively label them selfish or lazy, which has happened to me.
As to me. It is the culture we were raised in.
It is. It is.
It is an imperative that we acknowledge that we acknowledge the purpose that upbringing had at the time we were being raised. Do those values, are they still relevant today, or are they harming us?
And at its core level, are we upholding those values in ourselves out of habit or out of a deliberate action? Because even if they are harmful, it is still within a person's right to...
We are still completely autonomous people. We have the right to choose that path.
There are...
Which is why introspection and establishing our core values and our personal boundaries is necessary. Otherwise, we are just living in autopilot mode.
And when your autopilot and mine aren't calibrated, we're going to collide.
But once we establish for ourselves, and it is icky, gross, sticky, no one wants to do it. I didn't want to do it. I still don't want to do it. When you have to stop and look in the mirror and tell yourself, oh, you've been a really toxic person to other people. When you have to stop and say that to yourself, it is not comfortable.
When you have to yell at the man in the mirror, to pardon the phrase, when you have to have an uncomfortable conversation with the face in the mirror, it's not fun.
It's gross. It's icky.
I've had that conversation several times, some recently.
But it is necessary.
Yes, it is.
And that is my stance. My personal stance, outside of what other people may deem important, my personal stance is we're not going to move forward until we all are able to recognize that other people need compassion and respect because we acknowledge that we need compassion and respect.
Yeah.
I do not see a large shift happening until a majority of people are able to do that.
So
And
you slay one dragon only to move on to a much bigger one.
thus is life. What did a dragon ever do to you? Why are we slaying dragons?
As a former
dragons.
As a former firefighter, I get to use that metaphor.
Dragons Fire Association, I understand. We are slaying our past selves. And that's a monster.
It is.
That is a monster to slay.
It is. It is. I remember, it's almost laughable now, but I remember when we talked about how impossible it would be to change the SCA with how they viewed Romani. And here you are with that as a bullet point on your resume. All right.
And I am, it is my belief that this will be my life work and I will shake free of my mortal coil before this work is done.
Considering what it took to get the last one knocked out, I'm in no hurry to see this one fast-tracked.